Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to our session. We are going to go ahead and get started. As you will see, Jamie is sharing her screen, so you should be able to see our slide deck. Our presentation is Not All Literacy Strategies Are Created Equal, and this really kind of came out of some of the work that we've been doing with the GELN grades 6 through 12 literacy task force. So I am going to turn it over to Jamie so she can introduce herself and we'll get started.
All right. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Can you just confirm that you can see the slideshow? Is it? Becky, can you see that? Perfect. All right. I am Jamie Hales. I am a literacy consultant or coach at the Saginaw ISD, and I am so happy to see everyone here tonight. So thank you for joining us. Our contact information is on the screen, and I believe that this will also be placed in the bio on the website, in Becky's bio, and then we'll also drop a link into the chat for you as well, so you can have our contact information and our slide deck. Becky, are we ready to go? Can I?
Yeah, please, if you could drop the link so that everyone can access the folder with all of the materials that we're going to be using tonight, that'd be great.
Yep. Let me go ahead and grab that now for us. And let's cross our fingers and hope that works for us. If not, let me know and we can always try to adjust. So we are going to start off with a quick conversation around what is text. We felt like it'd be important to kind of make sure we have a common understanding of what text is. So when we start talking about concept maps and different strategies, we have that common understanding. So we just are going to invite you to look at the screen and look at the different text that we have on the screen and spend just 1 minute thinking about how these different types of text could be used in your classroom. It could be of service to your students in their learning. After we're done with that quick thinking, we're going to invite you to unmute or to drop in the chat some ideas of different types of text or how different types of text could be of service to your students. That's about 30 seconds. So go ahead and feel free to unmute or to drop in the chat different text that you might use or different ways that, or the different ways the examples on the screen could be used or could be useful to your students. Primary documents. And I would agree, graphs. I used to love using graphs in my classroom with my students for so many different reasons. Library of Congress. Give about 10 more seconds. I think I see some more people still typing. I don't want to cut them off before we move on. All right. Okay, so I'm seeing things about primary sources again, info different ways, helping student makes connects. Absolutely. So as we're talking about text, it's important that we talk about vocabulary as well, because as we are entering our students into different forms of text, we need to have an entry point for them into that text. And vocabulary is one way that we can do that. Vocabulary is also going to help our students start making those connections with concepts. So not only thinking of vocabulary as terms, but thinking about how that vocabulary is going to help our students make connections to different concepts. So just a couple reminders or different ways that we could think about vocabulary and how to use it. Providing multiple opportunities to practice and personalize the meaning of the words. Invite students to have that word consciousness about them. So looking at the morphology of the word, the root word, where else have you heard it? What does it sound like? Where else might you hear it? And then provide multiple exposures in multiple contexts for our students. And then that leads nicely into this idea of concept maps. And we're going to talk more about these later on. So this is just an idea of how to pull our text and our vocabulary together to help our students start thinking about different topics as concepts and how they're connected. When Becky and I were planning this, as always, she had a wonderful example that she just pulled off the top of her head because she's amazing and can do that. But she was talking about this idea of World War II and students with conflict and cooperation. And our students might be able to put that into the concept of conflict, but could they also look at it through that concept of cooperation? And so really how we can help our students start building those concepts through the use of text and vocabulary. Anything else you'd like to add to that, Becky?
No, you did a fantastic job. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So I'm sure that many of you have seen parts of this document that I've kind of broken up here on this slide. But I think often when we are working with texts and when we're, let's take that to that next level of primary source documents, we have one way of doing that usually starts with asking questions about that particular source. And usually the questions start at a DOK1 as far as cognitive rigor. And hopefully they build, right, in levels of rigor and complex thought. But I think sometimes in our rush, because I think most secondary teachers feel like that we hit the ground running on day one and there's not nearly enough time in the school year to address all of the content in our content standards, nor is there enough time to help our students practice repeatedly those skills that are a part of the C3 framework. And so I think because of that, we'll often use a document and ask certain questions. And I think sometimes we take for granted that it does take a lot of time in order for students to really analyze that particular document. Along with that, to make connections between documents. And so, here's where we have to kind of take a step back sometimes and think about, all right, what are some of those historical thinking skills that we need to model for our students and to get them in the habit of thinking about those when they're working with primary source documents. Because again, if you look at this slide, the very top left corner is very, very different, right, from a cognitive level than the questions that are in the lower right corner. And so again, we have to scaffold those questions and those levels of rigor if we expect our students to be able to analyze those documents. So again, Jamie and I are always talking about the C3 framework and how we use the C3 framework so frequently in a variety of ways. And so really, I was telling Jamie last year, we were having a conversation and I said, to really put the C3 into play, I think that a lot of my instruction, whether that's going to be in a K-12 setting, or whether that's going to be with my college level students, is going to be centered around the 4 dimensions of the C3. And so again, this is not going to be a complete IDM, but we are going to use some of the key components of an inquiry design model, and we are going to frame inquiry through this particular compelling question, really focusing on cultural diffusion during the time period of westward expansion, and how that cultural diffusion that was occurring during that time period, how it impacted America's identity for years to come. So we took the idea of the concept map to another level. And so this slide and the following slide are really kind of 2 different ways or perspectives with regard to the topic of manifest destiny. And you'll see a lot of visuals on both of these concept maps. But we are going to practice working with some different strategies with regard to each of those 2 concept maps. Because again, the concept map is a way of really solidifying important ideas and concepts. We know that embedded within that is going to be work that we're going to do with vocabulary in text for students. And so the concept map is really a way for students to organize their thinking around that compelling question. So that if we ask them as an assessment of some sort to answer that compelling question, that they are starting to organize the information in their minds around these 2 conflicting conceptual ideas about manifest destiny. So Jamie is going to assign some breakout groups, and we've got a couple of different tasks depending on the breakout group that you are in. And so in your breakout group, we would like you to utilize the assigned text or texts and to address the questions that are on the assigned slide. All of the documents that you're going to need are a part of the folder that you have been able to access. So for example, if you are in the breakout room that has to address a primary source document created by John O'Sullivan, we would ask that you would, Jamie, can you advance to the next slide, please? We would ask that you would take a look at the excerpt from John O'Sullivan's editorial about manifest destiny. It's very interesting because he is the person associated with creating or coining that term. But extensive research shows us that it really wasn't him, that it was a woman who actually coined the term a few years before O'Sullivan did. But again, answering those questions about that document, and for question 1, and then for question 2, really describing how some of the elements of his argument about manifest destiny about adding Oregon territory to the United States, and to compare that with a painting by Emmanuel Lutz. And I think you will see as you look at that painting, all of the elements of Manifest Destiny that come through in the visual of this painting. Group 2 is going to be looking at John C. Fremont's letter to his wife, Jessie. He was a famous frontiersman. He often led guides to help folks move from the east to the west, and to help them settle in certain places across the western frontier. And he often would write letters to his wife, and she was a writer. And so again, different type of primary source document, different purpose. But again, we're going to bring you back to the Emmanuel Lutz painting so that you can make some comparisons between the written word and a visual. Group 3 is going to be comparing two paintings. And again, those are in the folder. And group 4 is going to be engaged in a whiteout activity. So Jamie, have you created 4 groups? People can choose where they want to go.
They're created.
All righty.
How much time?
Jamie, I think when we originally had planned this, we were thinking maybe 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
All righty. We will give you a warning when there's 1 minute left to bring you back.
The rooms are open. Hopefully people can see them and begin to join. I will drop the folder into the chat again in case anybody came in after it was posted before.
Sorry, I have never done the groups before and I don't see where they are. Oh, just kidding. I think I found it.
Sarah, if not, let me know and I can put you in a room. So I think everyone is in room 3 and 4.
I was just going to make that comment. I'm like,
Yeah.
what?
Well, that's okay. That's okay.
Huh. Okay, what do we do with that?
I think I think maybe when we're doing the reflection portion, maybe that's a question we ask. As a learner, what drew you to 3 and 4 versus 1 and 2?
I love that.
And then we could talk about if this, in our classroom, this were to happen, what does that tell us where our students need support? Probably would be with text like 1 and 2.
Do you, okay, so as you look at these questions that I have on there, do you think that we should ask the question that you just composed before or after these?
I think before. I mean,
Okay.
do you have a strong opinion either way? I don't really, if we ask them before or after. maybe we ask it after, because it might come up with the questions. It might organically come up. Well, I chose this room or whatever because.
Okay.
I was getting a little bit nervous when I couldn't get into the room before. I was like, oh no.
Oh, I couldn't get in either.
Yeah.
And I even got as far as, like the generic zoom.us. And then I went and signed in and I got in, and I even went as far as like the room and start. I clicked the start the meeting.
Oh, okay.
And so I get the message, please wait, the host will let you in soon. I'm like,
yeah.
I'm the host. So I called Mary Burleson, and I'm like, Mary, it won't let me, I can't get in, and I said, I thought I was supposed to be the host. And she's like, you are, this is really weird. She's like, but I can get in. She's like, so hang on, I'll just let you in. I'm like, okay. But I mean, I've got to believe that other people are going to have that issue,
Right. Yikes.
Yeah.
So I did not look at my clock when we put them into breakout rooms. I forgot to do that.
I started a timer.
Oh, you're so good.
And I put it when I realized, that I should, I put it on for 3 minutes.
Okay.
Because I kind of thought after the 3 minutes is up, we could do that 1 minute, 60 seconds until we come back.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I figured at least a minute had passed.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, wow. We have a lot of time.
We have, 15 minutes left after they come back?
No, I thought we had, we're supposed to go from 5:40 to 6:30.
6:30. Oh, 25 minutes. Okay.
Yeah. So we have a ton of time.
Right. Maybe they come back. Maybe we have them go choose room 1 or 2. Since everyone chose 3 or 4, maybe we do it again.
We could, or we could have them play around with spec.
You could do that too.
Like take them through, like, what if you used spec to take a look at, or to reflect on, dismiss. Okay. To reflect on what you did. And, I don't know though, because
And they might need a little bit more than 5 minutes with the number of people they have in their rooms.
Yeah.
To have a conversation.
Yeah.
So maybe we give them like an extra minute or 2 there as well.
Yeah.
Because I think when we said 5, I was thinking smaller groups. I was thinking like 4 or 5 people in a room.
Yeah. So when we bring them back, let's go through those questions, and then be sure to ask yours if it doesn't get brought up.
Yep.
And then let's talk about, you guys were the learners and you were engaged, but as teachers, do you have any ideas for how you might scaffold the activity?
Okay.
I mean, does that make sense? It kind of goes along with our questions that we were talking about.
Yep.
I don't know.
No, I think it does. I think it would be, how would you scaffold it? How would you, if your students aren't comfortable with the text that you provide for them, you can't just jump into this type of activity day 1 of school.
Right. Yeah.
So what kind of preparation would your students need to feel comfortable having a conversation around these different types of texts?
I like that.
With that. So do you think the scaffold question and that question would come after our question on slide 18 about what it was like as a learner?
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't you?
Mhm. Yep.
Okay. So when they come back, let's give them, can you send the message?
Yeah. And I
Okay.
think I just do that if I close the rooms. Doesn't it
Yep.
automatically give them a 1 minute?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll address these questions, and then I'm gonna turn it over to you for the other
Okay.
ones. Okay.
For the other two. Yep. Okay.
And nobody's, okay, one person's popped back in. Okay.
Yeah, no one's really rushing back, which makes me feel like they maybe needed some more time.
Yeah.
I'm glad we added a couple extra.
Yeah, I am too.
Can you still see my slides up there?
I can see the slide, and then I can see the deck on the left.
Okay. Is it just the slide now without the deck? Okay.
Welcome back. So one of the things that we would like to have a short discussion about is that of reflection. So if you could for a moment reflect on your role as a learner in this activity, think about that. And Jamie and I are kind of curious. Do you think that you helped contribute in your group discussion by answering specific questions about the details in the painting and the text, or if you were working on whiteout just within that text, or do you think that you engaged in cognitively complex thinking, or maybe you did a little bit of both? And feel free to verbalize your answer, or if you prefer to type it in the chat, that's great too.
Well, I'll start. In our group, the paintings group 3, it seemed like there were many contributors addressing the questions that had been asked of us, and we kind of also diverged on our own path and discussions. And as time wound down and we had some extra time, we shared some ideas how we would use this strategy in our classroom and what we've used in the past. So it was a nice blend. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Anyone else want to talk about their experience?
There's a lot of responses in the chat. I don't know if you have the chat pulled up.
Mm-hmm. Laura, I'm curious. You indicated that you did a little bit of both, and so can you talk to us about what helped you make that jump from some of the more basic types of questions to then being able to produce some cognitively complex ideas about the texts?
Sure. We were at first, just starting to use the questions as a guide, but, you know, I was familiar with the John O'Sullivan painting and had never seen the other one. So then it really helped to engage me because I was curious about the differences and, um, I don't know. And we just started kind of thinking about, well, what were they trying to portray in this one? This guy clearly had actually been out west, or at least had a better idea. So it just kind of spun off from what we were looking for, I guess.
Okay, interesting. Helen, I really like your comment here about you were obviously in group 4 working on the whiteout, and once another group member had made a suggestion, then you started to go right for details that supported that answer. Can you talk about that process?
Sure. So the group member in question was Heather, and she gave a really good response in the chat as well. So once we'd all finished, we kind of talked about each of us had a slightly different process for looking at the text, then looking at the answers, or and kind of process of elimination was a theme we had in common. And Heather had kind of said, this answer really spoke to me. And so then we started discussing details that would support that answer mostly. Like we also talked about one other answer a little bit. And if anyone else from that group wants to jump in and clarify anything, that's great. So anyway, I hope I answered your question.
You did, thank you. And as everyone was in groups, Jamie and I kind of made an observation simultaneously. She just verbalized it faster than I did. Jamie, you wanna talk about what we were both noticing?
Sure. One thing that we both noticed is everyone went to groups 3 and 4. And we were just wondering what drew you to 3 and 4? Like what pulled you into 3 and 4, or what pushed you away from 1 or 2? We're just curious ourselves and how that might translate to our students in our classroom.
I was just interested in the comparison. That's just something that I really like to see, is just different aspects of the same kind of idea. So that's why I picked group 3.
The idea of comparing a painting to a painting is what drew you in?
Yeah, even if it was 2 completely different types of text, I still like the idea of comparing and getting those double perspectives.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Lindsay had said that she was drawn to the analyzing imagery. Michelle just didn't want to be alone, and I completely understand that, and I appreciate your honesty.
I think for me, I chose the analyzing the paintings just because we do so much reading in school, and it's fun to take a break from that and actually see that, oh wow, I can learn something about this topic by looking at an image. And I've used those in my world geography class using comic strips, and how they can present a message pretty clearly with very few words. And so the kids really like that. And so I thought, well, I'm going to try this too. And I needed a little more processing time. But it was, to me, that was what drew me in, was doing something a little different besides just reading.
I appreciate that perspective. And that goes back to what we had talked about at the very beginning about different types of texts and providing our students with those different opportunities and entry points, because there are some students who reading every single class, every single day becomes overwhelming. And so if they can get information from an image and still do those deeper analysis skills of comparing and analyzing through that image, then being able to provide that for them is important. So it sounds like another group already started having this conversation, which we were also talking about when you were in breakout rooms was how could you scaffold your students in, sorry, I just hit my metal rack on my desk. How could you scaffold your students into this type of activity? This is not a day one, first day of school activity, obviously. It might be very overwhelming for our students. They might not be ready for that heavy cognitive load that we were talking about earlier. So what kind of scaffolds could you do to help prepare your students for this type of text analysis?
I think, one thing that I like to do is model it, maybe bring up an image that's maybe not as complex as what I might like them to do, and just do kind of a think aloud in front of the class. And, well, look, here's what I'm noticing, and here's what I'm thinking. This makes me think this, and just kind of letting them follow along with my thought process would be one way to kind of start them off, maybe.
I think it was Stephen that had said with the imagery, he cut it into like smaller pieces, like into 4 corners, and have different groups analyzing different parts of it so that they could zoom in more and then share out, which kind of gave a bigger perspective.
I have never heard of that before or thought about that. I like that idea.
The old
Thank
magic
you.
paper technique, right?
In a sense, sometimes there's too much information and too much going on in the paintings or photographs, and let them focus in critical areas. And there always seems to be animals or dogs, and that draws the younger kids' attention. Hey, what's that dog doing there? So sometimes for perspective, and art used to be my weakness, and I've gained a deeper appreciation teaching AP US history. And that was one of the strategies that was given to me from a professor instructor. Thank you.
Any other thoughts or comments? I really appreciate the perspective that you brought to this and placing yourself in the shoes of the learner for this, like thinking through that student perspective. So we appreciate that.
So one of the strategies that I like to work with often when I'm working with students, particularly as it relates to either world history or US history, and also geography. And that is the strategy of SPEC. And some of you I know that are in this session are already using SPEC because we use it a lot in our Giants curriculum. But it really is a way of helping students organize their specific categories of thinking, if you will. And so by looking at either a piece of artwork or a photograph or a letter or a series of events, and making comparisons and thinking this through with regard to this kind of conceptual framework, I've found that it really helps students organize their thinking about events or about ideas. And so I could see utilizing this if we go back to thinking about our compelling question, and we have 2 concept maps that are kind of illustrating multiple perspectives in a variety of ways. I could really see using the SPEC chart to really help them analyze each of those ideas and concepts through this particular spec lens. What that also does is it really lends itself nicely if we ask our students to be writing about something. And so it's a way of helping them scaffold their writing. I don't know about you, but I remember the days when I would have students that would become paralyzed whenever I would ask them to even write a paragraph. And the number one reason why they would become paralyzed was that they would say to me, I don't know how to start. And so when I started to utilize the spec strategy, I didn't get that issue nearly as much as I had previously. And so it was kind of a way of explaining, you could use each of these spec categories or characteristics, and you could organize your paragraph or your essay around each of those. And so again, just kind of helping them scaffold their writing really helps with, what do I want to say from a social perspective? What do I want to bring forward in my writing from a political perspective, right? And so it really, again, helps them kind of solidify their thinking before they even put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard, right?
And if I could just add to that real briefly, we talked about chunking up that image to making it more accessible for students. And we're doing that same thing by having them thinking about in the different categories. You're taking something that seems overwhelming and making it into manageable pieces.
Absolutely. So again, if we think about our compelling question, we know that compelling questions, good ones, are the ones that lead to arguments. And so the compelling question and helping students figure out how they want to answer that compelling question is a great way to introduce either a paragraph or in a larger scope, an argumentative writing piece. And again, asking them to organize their paragraphs, for example, around a social perspective, a political perspective, an economic perspective, a cultural perspective, right? Now, you do run the risk. I mean, you can count. You do run the risk of ending up with a 6-paragraph essay. If you're okay with that, then great. If you have to have a 5-paragraph essay, maybe you eliminate one of the spec categories. Jamie, any thoughts about the structuring when we think about the disciplinary literacy essential of writing?
Well, I think it goes back to the idea of scaffolding students into the writing and really giving them that lens with which to write through and to look at the text and the writing through when they start this. So by narrowing it down and providing that lens for them, just like when you looked at the text in your breakout rooms, if we just said, go analyze this, who knows what we would have come back with, or you probably could have used 3 hours in your breakout room to kind of narrow it down. So I think it really provides that lens that is so important when we talk about disciplinary literacy, taking that perspective when looking at it. Which leads us into our next slide about disciplinary literacy. And as Becky had mentioned at the beginning, that is really where our ideas around this this presentation came from, is our work through the disciplinary literacy essentials. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, with the document yet. I'm seeing some people shaking their heads, so it sounds like perhaps you are, which is great. But it's a document that is research-based practices, instructional practices to help our students really look through the lens of their discipline and when you are designing your lessons. I'm sorry, we just had someone, there we go, in the waiting room. We just wanted to draw attention to the document so that you know it's out there. I believe it's in the folder as well for you. If not, it's there, but there are 10 essentials that you can look at. Reading is one of them, writing is one of them, speaking and vocabulary is another one. So the things we talked about today are grounded in research. Just so that is out there.
Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah.
So we have about a minute and a half left, and we wanted to open it up in case anyone has any questions about what we did today or about the documents that we utilized. Oh, Michelle, great question. Jamie, I'm not sure about you. I go to the Library of Congress often. I also go to Docs Teach through National Archives. I think that those two are probably like my number one go-tos. Jamie, do you have a one that's a number one go-to?
Library of Congress is always my number one go-to.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of any other ones, but that's usually what I need. I can get from there.
And we could even put a list together, I bet, put it in that folder. That might be helpful.
That might be helpful, and people could add to it. That would be
Love it.
Wonderful.
Let's do that. Okay. Thank you so much for attending. Again, if you have questions for either one of us, you have our contact information, and we thank you for your attendance and your time and your thoughts this evening.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.